Liam Halligan sat down with Home Secretary Suella Braverman. He's going to be here in just a moment to reflect on what she said. Also, England's Chief Medical Officer has attacked the appalling marketing of vapes to children, saying it's clear that some products are intended to appeal to underage kids. I'm going to be looking at that. And a story I do not understand at all, something to do with an independent football regulator who's going to be looking at the responsibilities of clubs, the way that money is passed through and how it affects grassroots level football. Apparently, it's a very good idea for the beautiful game. Find out why. And in the last few moments, the Home Office have published its quarterly statistics on irregular migration to the UK, providing an overview of irregular migrants who come to here, including those arriving on small boats across the English Channel. I'm going to be down in Dover later on to bring you the latest. Very good morning. We've got lots to get through this morning, including news that the legendary football commentator John Motson has died at the age of 77. I had the good fortune to meet him on a few occasions, actually. We're going to be looking back on his remarkable career. All that to come and more. Let me know what you think on that and all the other stories this morning. Email me gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first of all, let's get you up to date with what's happening here and around the world with Rhiannon.
Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 11, your top stories from the GB newsroom. The number of asylum seekers waiting for an initial decision on their claim has hit its highest level since records began. More than 160,000 people were waiting by the end of December, up 60% on the previous year. The figures come as the Home Secretary tells GB News in an exclusive interview that nothing's ruled out when it comes to tackling illegal immigration. More than 45,000 people crossed the Channel in small boats last year, which Suella Braverman describes as unacceptable. Speaking to Liam Halligan, she also said she understands why people are frustrated with hotels housing asylum seekers.
It's clear that we have an unsustainable situation in towns and cities around our country whereby, because of the overwhelming numbers of people arriving here illegally and our legal duties to accommodate them, we are now having to house them in hotels, and that is causing understandable tensions within communities, pressures on local resources.
And you can watch the full 22-minute interview with the Home Secretary on the GB News YouTube channel. An attempted murder investigation has been launched after a senior police officer was shot in front of children in County Tyrone. Named as Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell, he was hit multiple times when two masked men opened fire at a sports centre in Omagh. He's in a critical but stable condition in hospital. Police investigating the attack say they're focusing on dissident Republican group The New IRA. Former MP for Fermanagh and South Tyrone, Tom Elliott, says the community is understandably shocked.
We thought we were living in a very peaceful time. We thought that we had passed this, and I remember, talking about this several times whenever the Troubles were here. But we didn't think at this stage that we would be back to a society like this, where people came and shot someone in front of young kids and an attempted murder. And it's so brutal. It was planned, targeted, premeditated.
Secretary of State for Northern Ireland Chris Heaton-Harris has condemned the attack.
It was a cowardly and callous attack that happened last night. A very senior and well-known local police officer is now in a critical condition in hospital. Now, our thoughts are with him and his family, and everybody in the policing community, and actually the community of Omagh, is completely shocked by this, because society has moved on in Northern Ireland. There is no place for violence like this.
Sir Keir Starmer has outlined his vision for the country if Labour were to win the next general election. Launching his party's 5 national missions, the Labour leader says the UK needs to be more competitive. The economy was highlighted as a top priority, and he promised to be tough on crime. Sir Keir says sticking plaster politics is holding everyone back.
The pattern is always the same. Distracted by the short-term obsessions that fixate Westminster, held back by a cynicism which uses low trust in politics as an excuse to narrow our ambitions, blinkered to the potential of an active government setting the direction, we lurch from crisis to crisis, always reacting, always behind the curve. A sticking plaster, never a cure.
An independent regulator for English football will be introduced to ensure clubs run sustainably after a fan-led government review. The new regulator will implement a licensing system for all clubs from the Premier League down to the National League. It'll have the power to block clubs from joining a breakaway European Super League. It also aims to prevent historic clubs from going out of business, as well as giving fans greater input. Sports Minister Stuart Andrew described it as a new era for English football.
We will bring in an independent regulator that will seek to ensure that clubs are more sustainable, and that will hopefully then bring forward more stability within the football pyramid, because at the end of the day we're concerned about the fans. They're the ones that invest so much in their clubs. They're really important to their local communities, and we want to make sure that that success is built on, but it's there for years to come.
And staying with football commentator John Motson has died aged 77. Known by millions of football fans as Motty, he covered 10 World Cups, 10 European Championships and 29 FA Cup finals for BBC Sport before retiring from the organisation in 2018. During his illustrious career spanning over half a century, he became one of football's most instantly recognisable commentators. And he'll be greatly missed. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Bev.
Good morning. Welcome back to Bev Turner today. So the Home Secretary has exclusively told GB News that nothing is ruled out when it comes to fixing the Channel migrant crisis. In an interview with GB News' Liam Halligan, she also issued a veiled threat to Number 10 over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Let's have a listen.
Talking of the law, Home Secretary, over 45,000 people crossed the Channel in small boats last year. The number this year is expected to be a lot higher. Rishi Sunak, in his own words, is committed to passing new laws to stop the small boats. Those laws have now been laid before Parliament. Does that mean that the government's ruled out leaving the European Convention on Human Rights in order to try and tackle this vexed problem?
Well, I think that there are legitimate questions that we need to start asking relating to our membership of the European Convention of Human Rights and its operation in the United Kingdom. We've seen there's a politicised and expansionist court in Strasbourg that regulates the convention, sometimes at odds with British values, whether it's our ability to remove people to Rwanda, as we saw last year. Its operation, combined with the ECHR and the court, have operated to stymie policymaking.
You make a strong legal case with respect to Home Secretary, but the optics of leaving the ECHR are difficult. You've got the stomach to leave it, clearly. Has the Prime Minister?
At this stage, nothing's ruled out. We need to ensure that we fix this problem of illegal migration. That's my priority. And as the Prime Minister himself has said, he'll do whatever it takes to achieve that goal.
In light of those small boat incidents, we've seen protests now around the country, increasingly in Liverpool, in Rotherham, protests planned in Newquay. Some have said that those protesters are far right. Is that a fair characterisation of those protesters?
Well, what I would say firstly is that violence is never acceptable, and intimidation, harassment, any forms of abuse to anybody are totally should be condemned, and I condemn them in the fullest possible terms. And it's clear that we have an unsustainable situation in towns and cities around our country, whereby, because of the overwhelming numbers of people arriving here illegally and our legal duties to accommodate them, we are now having to house them in hotels. We are all frustrated with the situation that we are currently finding ourselves in, and you know, it is clear and undeniable that there are really serious pressures on communities, and saying so does not make you racist or bigoted.
Simon Clarke, former Cabinet Minister, has said there will be a very real problem for the government if there is a Northern Ireland deal that doesn't carry the support of the DUP. Is he right?
Listen, the DUP are an important voice in this debate and in this discussion. They
Vital.
speak.
Can we have a deal that they don't agree to?
We have always worked very closely with the DUP. They are unionists. They speak for a significant portion of the communities in Northern Ireland, and they need to be round the table. Ultimately, Stormont will only function if the DUP supports any proposal.
You resigned, of course, as a Brexit minister in 2018 over Theresa May's deal. Would you resign over this?
Listen, I don't think we need to be talking about resignation. I've taken a very forthright position in the past because I've found the terms of previous agreements intolerable. I don't support selling out on Northern Ireland and allowing the EU a foothold in the United Kingdom.
Do you like being Home Secretary?
Well, I see my role as telling the truth and then fixing the problem. And sometimes the truth is uncomfortable for some people, and they might get upset by hearing the truth. I'm not going to shy away from telling the truth to the British people and for the British people. That's my role as Home Secretary.
Well, the king of the first sit-down interview, I think you had Kwesi Kwarteng, Kemi Badenoch and now Suella Braverman, Liam Halligan. People are getting in touch saying, Jonathan said, in my opinion, Suella Braverman lied to Liam Halligan. She's no intention of stopping the boats and deporting the illegal immigrants. It's all smoke and mirrors. You can spot a lie when you see one, can't you?
I wouldn't use that word. I'd say it's a very, very contentious issue. And it's true, as my questioning showed, and if people are really interested, they can watch the full 22-minute sit-down interview. No holds barred. We didn't agree questions. There was no pre-arrangement at all for her to give me this interview at this time when the Prime Minister is grappling with this Northern Ireland Protocol issue, grappling with small boats, is itself a pretty punchy act. But as she said in that interview, the Home Office is about to lay before Parliament legislation to tackle the small boats issue, which doesn't involve at this point leaving the European Convention of Human Rights, which was written by British lawyers, British MPs. We were the first country to ratify it in 1951. It was a response to the catastrophe of the Second World War. The political optics of leaving that are very, very difficult. She's got the stomach to leave it if we need to overrule the Strasbourg court, which she calls obstructionist and politicised. Has the Prime Minister got the stomach to leave it if needs be? This legislation suggests not, but what she wants as a lawyer, she wants the option of leaving the ECHR still on the table because the Lords will push back. That ermine-clad chamber of legal aid and Remain will push back on this legislation. So she wants the option hanging over the Lords. OK, then we'll leave the ECHR. And as a lawyer, that's what she's trying to engineer.
Yeah, OK. Thank you so much, Liam Halligan. Right, now, some very sad news. It's just breaking this morning. Legendary football commentator John Motson has died at the age of 77. Motson covered 10 World Cups, 10 European Championships, 29 FA Cup finals for BBC Sport before retiring from the organisation in 2018, known by many as Motty. He'd worked on Match of the Day since 1971 and commentated on almost 2,500 televised games. His voice, of course, was unmistakable.
I couldn't help feeling excited every time I came to Wembley. The whole aura of the stadium seemed to me to lend itself to drama, and my word, there was plenty of that.
So that's sports broadcaster John Motson there, who sadly has lost his life. Let's join GB News regular sports correspondent Paul Coit now. Good morning, Paul. Great to see you.
Morning, Bev.
Even under sad circumstances, an absolute icon of the world of sports broadcasting was Motty.
Absolute icon, and it's only a few days after we lost Dickie Davis towards the end of last week. And when it came to commentators, Motty, and I knew him really well, was just the best. And I think everybody's got memories of some of those great commentaries. Personally, if I think back of Spurs back in '81, the famous Ricky Villa goal. There was the Wimbledon FA Cup final when they beat Liverpool, when he said the crazy gang have beaten the Culture Club back in '88. But the great thing about Motty is that he always said that he never planned anything. You often get commentators these days, you can hear it scripted. Whereas Motty always went in with a card with every player, a little fact about them, and he hand wrote these things and spent ages over them before every commentary. But everything else always came off the tip of the tongue. And he was an absolute master of his craft. And I think we'll all miss him very well.
I was lucky to meet him a couple of times. We were both actually working for ITV Sport at the time, and I was a newbie and didn't know what I was doing. You might say not much has changed in 20 years, right? But he was really kind. He was really helpful, and he managed to be sort of mentoring without being patronising, which is not easy to do. He was a really good bloke.
He was, yeah, and you know what? You hit the nail on the head, because I've worked with him a lot over the last 10 years. And the last time I saw him is that we had a lunch. There was a corporate lunch that we did in the City of London. And he was always so nice and always very complimentary about everything I ever did. And he was always happy to work with me and very easy to work with. I mean, a little eccentric, don't get me wrong. He was always a little eccentric, was John. But it was always a little off-putting, because you could hear, obviously, when you're speaking to him, and you hear this voice coming straight at you, and you're thinking, it kind of sounds like John Motson, but it is. It's coming from the man that I'm speaking to. And one of the fondest memories I have, I think, after we'd done the lunch, and it was for the World Cup, and this was back in November, and we sat down, and he always liked to have a scotch afterwards, and we sat down and had a drink, and he said, you know what, Paul, this is what I really like. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, you know what, just sitting down, having a drink, talking about football with friends. And that was probably the last time I saw him. I saw him briefly at Spurs a couple of weeks ago, but the last real conversation we had, and what a way to go. But what a legend, just the best there was. And there was always that rivalry as well with Barry Davis. And he'd always admit to that, because Barry Davis, of course, at the BBC, there was a friendly rivalry between them that went on right up until when they retired. But for me, Motty was the king. He was the best there was.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Paul. Paul Coit there. And if you're listening on the radio, of course, a lot of the footage of John Motson wearing his distinctive, famous sheepskin coat. Right, we're sticking with football. The Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport has released a white paper on football governance. I'm not even going to pretend, Paul Hawkins, to read out what I'm talking about, because I don't understand it at all.
I'll be honest, when you start any sentence with white paper, most people glaze over. White paper? What's that?
Right, I'm not going to fake it. I can't fake it, Paul. You tell me what's going on and why is this good for football?
Right, so you know how you have Ofgem that regulate the energy industry, you have Ofcom that regulate the industry we work in, you've got lots of regulators for bodies. Well, now, for the first time in the world, really, England is going to get its first regulator for football. I don't know if they call it off-foot or something. I don't know what. But it's going to, essentially, and they're going to step in and regulate the game, because at the moment it's unregulated at the moment. And really, this goes back to a Conservative manifesto commitment in 2019. They said we're going to get the fans involved. We're going to have a fan-led review coming off the back of Bury FC, one of the oldest football clubs.
My hometown, Bury FC.
Is it? OK, which, as you know, then, which doesn't really exist anymore. It went out of business because of financial administration problems. They undertook this fan-led review. It started last April. It's come back. They're going to publish what they call a white paper. It's political jargon. It essentially means that they're going to publish a plan to put in a football regulator, like Ofgem in the energy industry, and it is going to oversee 4 things within the game. Firstly, it's going to stop the big clubs in the Premier League, like Spurs and Manchester United, going to join a big European Super League. You might remember that caused a lot of uproar when it was mooted.
Yes. There
were fans outside stadiums going, no, we don't want to join a big European Super League.
That's right. And none of them did go?
No, it never happened.
Right.
For various reasons. So, first, they'll have the power to stop them doing that. Secondly, financial health. So, to stop clubs like Bury, Macclesfield has been in difficulties, Derby County, it's going to introduce stricter financial tests for the owners and the directors. It'll introduce a new licensing system. So if you want to be a football club and you want to compete in the Premier League, the English Football League, which is League One, League Two and the Championship, or the National League, otherwise known as the Conference, then you'll need to have a football licence, a proper licence, like a TV licence or a fishing licence. Think of it like that. So you're going to need to have a licence to comply. The final 2 points, and these are the things that are making it really popular, is fans will get a say in the running of the club. So if you want to change the fan shirts, the colours, the crests, if you want to relocate the club to another stadium, you've got to consult the fans first. So it's about giving fans more of a say in what happens with their clubs. And then finally, and for me, as someone who played part football, Saturdays and Sundays, Sunday mornings, all over Essex, London and Surrey, it can force the Premier League to give more of its money to grassroots and lower league clubs.
Right.
Which is huge.
So it's like, so democracy coming to football.
Or the other way to look at it is more regulation.
Well, I was going to say, I bet this is the kind of thing that the fans might quite like. The bosses will hate, possibly. And do we know who's going to run it?
We don't know.
That's a good job, isn't it? You like football.
There's a lot of kind of overview here, but the devil will be in the detail.
Yeah.
Let me just read to you something from West Ham owner David Sullivan. He says a football regulator is a terrible idea. The government are terrible at running everything. Look at the mess the country is in. We pay the highest taxes ever for the worst service from the worst government that I've seen in my lifetime. So it's fair to say he's not a fan of the football.
Who was that?
And that's from the owner of West Ham,
right.
David Sullivan.
Don't hold back, David.
The Premier League says it appreciates the government's commitment, but it's a vital regulation does not damage the game or its ability to attract investment. And you know, the English Football League, which is below the Premier League, the grassroots, the people at the bottom are well up for this because potentially they could get more money for rubbish pitches, changing rooms, that kind of thing.
Paul Hawkins, you made that so much more interesting than I thought it was going to be. Thank you very much. Let me know what you think. GB Views at gbnews.uk. So still to come this morning, England's Chief Medical Officer, Sir Chris Whitty, has finally criticised what he calls the appalling marketing of vapes to children. Are you concerned about your kids getting their hands on these devices? Stick around for that discussion. I'll be back in just 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Very good morning. It's 11:25. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. My guests are back with me. I'm delighted to be joined this morning by political commentator Emma Webb and former Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone. So, Emma, Shamima Begum lost her appeal to regain UK citizenship. Was that yesterday? Was it the day before? I've lost track of time this week, doing 2 shows a day. I think it was the day before yesterday. And, of course, there are lots of comment pieces in the papers today. The teacher who was seriously injured in the 2017 suicide bomb attack on the Manchester Arena. Of course, that claimed 22 lives. She says today Shamima Begum should never be allowed back to the UK. You agree?
I completely agree, and I think that this is extremely powerful. This victim of this arena bombing, saying that the girls who went to the Manchester gig in 2017 never came home. So why should Shamima Begum? I think that absolutely hits the nail on the head, because one of the really frustrating aspects of this entire debate around Begum returning is this constant appeal to sympathy as if she's the victim. That Times didn't decide to put a Yazidi victim of sex trafficking on the front of the magazine. Begum went to go and build a state that was genocidal, that trafficked women, that had slave markets for Yazidi women, Shia Muslims, for Christians. They have committed some of the worst atrocities in the 21st century. The idea that this girl is the victim and we should feel sympathy for her is sick.
Well, and young woman now. I mean, we have to remember she's 23. She's no longer a girl.
Exactly, she's no child. And I think that this is a really, really powerful comment from this victim of the Manchester Arena bombing, because if you remember, Begum actually said when she was first interviewed, when they first found her in the camp, that she said that she thought the coalition airstrikes in Syria were tit for tat. She said that she hadn't heard of the Manchester Arena bombing, I think, but she clearly was very much, still at that point, very much beholden to ISIS ideology, and waited till the very, very final hour to leave the project of building Islamic State. So I think that we should feel no sympathy for this woman. I think that she should not be allowed back. I think it was absolutely the right decision to strip her of her citizenship. And I think that the British public have absolutely no obligation to feel sorry for her at all.
What would you like to see happen to her then?
I think that she should stay where she is.
In the camp forever?
I think it's not our problem what happens to her. She made her bed, and now she has to lie in it.
Ken Livingstone,
well, look,
is it our problem?
She was born and brought up in London. She's a British citizen. If she's committed a crime, she'll be in a prison here in Britain, not on some horrible little camp in the Middle East, which is not, being bound by the sort of laws that apply to our prison. So, if she is guilty of this, keep her in prison, but here, not send a British citizen to somewhere in the Middle East where they'll be subject to all sorts of abuse and most probably being raped regularly.
It would be very difficult to build a case that would see her put behind bars if she came back.
Well, if we can't prove that, why are we keeping her out? If she's found guilty of a crime that has led to the death of people, she should be in prison, most probably for the rest of her life. But if we can't prove that, why are we dealing like that?
Well, Emma? So this is actually a really big problem, that with returning fighters, it's very difficult to secure a prosecution because a conviction, because it's difficult to collect evidence in a war zone, particularly for women in Islamic State. Obviously, this war took place quite some time ago now. Very difficult to collect evidence of crimes committed. But that doesn't mean that the Home Secretary doesn't have evidence before him that can inform. And he has the power to do this. He has the power to strip people of their citizenship if they have dual citizenships. Now, she has claim to Bangladeshi citizenship. She's entitled to it. So that means we haven't actually left her stateless, even if Bangladesh don't want her. Understandable that Bangladesh don't want her.
Well, Bangladesh have said, we'll take her back and she'll be tried and she'll be executed.
So the point is, she won't face justice here. She will be having to be constantly,
very quickly, because we do have to move on. But what do you think she would do if she got back?
I think that she would become a celebrity here. I think that's the way that the narrative is being currently spun. She'd probably come back, make an awful lot of money as some kind of celebrity figure. But she also has this potential to be. She's a symbol. The security services have already said they're seeing people now going back to former war zones, places like Syria. She could become a flashpoint and a symbol for other extremists. So bringing her back here in many ways, I think, would be absolutely the opposite of justice.
Ken, let me bring this to you. Big story in the Daily Telegraph today. Labour and the Lib Dems in a bid to block a bill to scrap EU laws. What do you make of it?
Absolutely right, because those EU laws set standards for working conditions, pay levels. I mean, they have defended the lifestyle of ordinary people here in this country. If those are scrapped, then a lot of companies will start cutting the wages of their staff, making life all sorts of conditions worse. Those laws have improved the quality of our life. We should keep them, even if we've left the EU.
But do you not have faith that our government could create those sorts of laws? If Keir Starmer gets in at the next election, which you may be confident that he will do so, they would be safe in his hands, wouldn't they? Employment laws?
Yes, under Keir Starmer they would, but not under this government, which is the worst of my lifetime and the most dishonest of my lifetime.
OK, Emma Webb?
I think it's anti-democratic. If the people vote to change certain laws, then those laws ought to be changed. And if the people vote, and I very much doubt that people are going to vote in a government that are going to take away employment protections and things like that. I think that this is it's a much more important issue than the amount of attention that it's actually got. I think that Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives are right, that we should be scrapping EU legislation and we should be making up... Because remember, a lot of this EU legislation is not bespoke to any particular country. This is just a one-size-fits-all. Leaving the European Union was supposed to entail taking back control and having sovereignty and making our own decisions and really, in political terms, as a nation, growing up and making decisions for ourselves. So, of course, we should decide which laws we want to keep, drop the rest of them. If we debate every single one of these 4,000 laws in Parliament, we're going to be going forever.
So you don't need to. Just keep them as they are.
What? No, but that's not
why do you think they're wrong?
Is it?
They're defending the quality of our life. They're protecting our environment. Take these away, our life will be worse.
Well, let me know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Still to come, I'll give you the latest on vaping and Chris Whitty's scathing warning to those selling to teenagers. That's after your morning's news with Rhiannon.
Bev, thank you. It's 11:33. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The number of asylum seekers waiting for an initial decision on their claim has hit 160,000. That's the highest level since records began. The figures come as the Home Secretary tells GB News in an exclusive interview that nothing's ruled out when it comes to tackling illegal immigration. More than 45,000 people crossed the Channel in small boats last year, which Suella Braverman describes as unacceptable. Speaking to Liam Halligan, she also said she understands why people are frustrated with hotels housing asylum seekers.
It's clear that we have an unsustainable situation in towns and cities around our country whereby, because of the overwhelming numbers of people arriving here illegally and our legal duties to accommodate them, we are now having to house them in hotels, and that is causing understandable tensions within communities, pressures on local resources.
And you can watch the full 22-minute interview with the Home Secretary on the GB News YouTube channel. Police investigating the shooting of Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell in Omagh believe dissident Republican group the New IRA may have been behind the attack. He was targeted by two masked men who opened fire at a sports centre in front of children last night. He remains in a critical but stable condition in hospital. And Sir Keir Starmer has outlined his vision for the country if Labour were to win the next general election. Launching his party's 5 national missions, the Labour leader says the UK needs to be more competitive. The economy was highlighted as a top priority and he promised to be tough on crime. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. It's back to Beth now.
Welcome back. This is Bev Turner. Today, Emma Webb and Ken Livingstone are still with me. We're going to be talking about Sadiq Khan's ULEZ plan, of course. Ken Livingstone was the man who introduced the congestion charge to London, so I'm going to be holding him to account over that. But first of all, are you concerned about your children vaping? Some teenagers think it is very trendy, but should we be doing more to keep bad habits away from them? I'm going to be talking about that in just a moment. Here's a sting.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning, it's 11:37. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Thank you for joining me. So the last time we talked about the huge number of children who are vaping, you were as incensed as me. Finally, the UK's Chief Medical Officer has caught up with us. So Chris Whitty has criticised the marketing of vapes. He's described it as appalling, saying it's clear that some products are designed to appeal to children. Well, research published last July found the number of young people vaping is increasing, with many being influenced by social media. Let's talk now to Julie Cook, a journalist who caught her 14-year-old son vaping, and John Dunn, the Director General of the Vaping Industry Association. Julie, let me come to you first. Are these products too easy for teenagers to get their hands on?
Yes, I think they are. I think, you know, all the evidence suggests that they're becoming ever more easy for them to get hold of. My own son was found to be dabbling with one recently, and some of his friends I know vape. I've seen lots of people around where I live walking around with a vape in their hand, and they're obviously under 16. So I think it's become endemic among teenagers.
John, you must be delighted to hear that, because the vaping industry is making an absolute fortune, and you're guaranteeing a generation which will be addicted to these products for the next 20 years.
Well, absolutely not. And one of the things that the UKVIA has been pushing the government for instance, is increased fines for retailers that are caught selling to minors. We've called for fines in the region of £10,000 per instance. We've also called for the fact that vape stores and retailers selling vape products should be licensed. Because as your previous speaker said, yes, they are too easy to get a hold of, and in outlets that are not designed for the sale of these products. But what you need to remember is it's illegal for anybody under the age of 18 to buy a vape product in this country. However, very few retailers are actually fined for selling them.
You know what should be illegal, John? It should be illegal to make them so attractive to children. Bubblegum flavour, strawberry, watermelon, bright coloured packaging. You're marketing them to kids.
Absolutely not. These products have been around in these flavours for over 11 years in the UK. And vaping has become the most popular way to quit smoking in the UK. It's twice as effective as all other NOT products that are available in the market. Adults like flavours, that's a fact. And the most popular flavours out there are fruit flavours for all types of vaping products.
Julie, this is purely marketing to adults and it's inconvenient if the children are find them appealing as well.
I completely disagree. I agree with what you just said, Bev, that they are clearly marketed at children. They are flavours that children like, sweet flavoured, bright colours. I really disagree because when these first came out years ago, they were designed as a way to stop existing smokers come off smoking safely. And they should have been in a sort of ordinary prescriptive package of plain white things, how to help you get over your smoking habit, not these beautiful, pretty, elaborately designed, lovely pink flavouring and bubble gum and watermelon, as you've just said. They're aimed at children. And as you say, I worry that these set of children now will start off with this as a gateway drug almost, move on to smoking when this doesn't hit the spot anymore, and we'll simply have more smokers.
But that is exactly what's happening. I would argue that teenagers are starting with vaping and they're moving on to cannabis because it's becoming so normal to them. John, every mother that I talk to, every parent that I talk to, this is a massive problem. What do you think about Chris Whitty coming out and agreeing that the marketing of them is appalling, to use his words? You must have been disappointed to hear that.
Well, absolutely not. I agree with him. I agree that these products shouldn't be on social media. In fact, I had a meeting last week with Facebook to talk about that very subject. But what's important here, you quote, a study that was done last year. If you actually read that study, the amount of young people that are vaping more than once a week that didn't previously smoke is less than 1.7%.
Rubbish.
And Ash point out in that very report that this is normal teenage trial, and actually less than they see in other forms of products that are designed for adults like alcohol.
I totally disagree. I would love you to come out with me one day, John. Let's go and hang out in the local park, or we'll go to a music festival together, you and I. I think we could probably have quite a good time. But I will show you that all the teenagers walking around have got them in their hands. 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, they're secretly doing it. And the thing about vaping is you can't smell it like a parent can smell cigarettes. That's part of the problem, isn't it, Julie? They can get away with it. I know people who've got kids who are vaping in their bedrooms, John, and their parents don't know.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with you on that. And do you realise that out of all of the fines that retailers get, if they're unlucky enough to get fined for selling a vaping product to anybody under the age of 18, they get about a £250 fine. I talked to Trading Standards in Scotland. They haven't had a single case that has gotten to court for a fine yet. And this is why, as an industry, we've called for fines of £10,000, instant fines, right to the retailer at the point of service. That's what's going to solve this problem.
Well, cigarette packaging has the images on it, obviously, the health warnings. Should you see those on vape packaging, Julie?
Well, I mean, ideally, yes. I mean, the trouble is the studies aren't out yet that show just how bad it is. I think what's going to happen is almost like with the tobacco industry legal suits, which were in the last century, where people complained years later, why wasn't I warned? Why wasn't I told cigarettes were bad for me? Where was the government warning? I worry that in 10, 15 years' time, we might have another one of those lawsuits against government, against companies saying, why wasn't I warned as a teenager?
John? Why aren't you warning people about the health risks? There must be some.
Well, first of all, the packaging does have health warnings on it, the exact same health warnings as cigarettes do. But secondly, this is probably one of the most researched products in the history of products. The government itself, all of the reports from from the Public Health England, from OHID now, all talk about how vaping is at least 95% less harmful. 220 people a day die in the UK from smoking-related diseases. We haven't had a single case of anybody in the world dying from vaping nicotine e-liquid. That's a fact.
We can't possibly...
Can we talk about diacetyl? Can we talk about diacetyl, which is a product that caused a thing called popcorn lung? There was a group of people who were working in a factory making popcorn who got a thing called popcorn lung from breathing in diacetyl, which is a byproduct of the products they were making. And they ended up with scarring in their lungs. And diacetyl is in some vapes. So are our children breathing in diacetyl as well?
Well, first of all, diacetyl is a banned substance in vapes. It has been for over 7 years. And also, diacetyl levels that were found in the early days of vaping products were at significantly lower levels, in fact, 700 times lower than in cigarettes. And there hasn't been a single case of popcorn lung reported from smoking or vaping anywhere in the world.
OK, all right. Thank you both. John, I really appreciate it. It would be so easy to just turn down these sorts of interviews, but it's a conversation we need to be having. We need to be protecting our kids. Thanks so much, both of you. Now, in the last hour, the Home Office have published its quarterly migration figures, providing an overview of irregular migrants who come to the UK, including those arriving on small boats across the English Channel. Well, joining me now is our reporter, Ray Addison, in Dover. Good morning, Ray. What are the headlines from these very important figures?
Good morning, Bev. Yeah, I'm here on the Dover coastline where so many of those small boats have been arriving over the last 12, 13 months or so that these figures are relating to. Now, the Home Office has announced, of course, this morning that just under 46,000 migrants arrived using that small boat route up to December of last year. And they came here on 1,109 small boats. 87% of those who arrived via that route last year were male, 28% were from Albania and 20% from Afghanistan. So those two nationalities making up just under half of all of those who arrived here. Now, 90% of those who came here claimed asylum, maybe slightly lower than many people would expect. Now, if we compare those numbers to 5 years ago, in 2018, just 299 migrants came here on small boats, 43 to be precise. And so we can see over the last 5 years, that number has just increased absolutely dramatically. Now, I've been speaking to residents here now, perhaps it is surprising, but I was surprised to see that not many wanted to sort of come on camera. A lot of people have got very emotive opinions on this subject. Some saying that they feel very sorry for the migrants because it's a very difficult, dangerous and scary journey. One person is saying to me that they have been forced to take that route because there are no legal options. Another saying that when they come here, they should be allowed to work so that they're less of a burden to the taxpayer as well. One lady said to me that she finds it very frightening when she sees the small boats arrive because she says, you know, we don't know who these people are, where they've been or what they could potentially have done. And also other comments, people saying that in terms of their housing, there are many people here, UK citizens, veterans, who miss out on housing when housing is provided. Now, earlier on we heard that as part of Rishi Sunak's pledge to try and eliminate the asylum claim backlog, we are going to have a new fast-track scheme introduced by the Home Office to clear part of that backlog. Just 12,000 though of the 150, so a real sort of drop in the ocean in that sense. This applies to people from Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, Eritrea and Yemen as well, people who came here before June 28th of last year. They'll be allowed to apply for refugee status by filling out a 10-page questionnaire. The officials are saying that in the vast majority of these cases, no asylum interview will be required, and that has drawn some criticism, with people saying, well, hold on, what about security checks and our safety of British residents, Bev?
OK, thank you, Ray. Thanks so much. No doubt there'll be shows ahead of me later today that will be looking at those figures in detail. But first of all, let me get back to my guest this morning, political commentator Emma Webb and former Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone. Right, Ken, I'm going to come to you first on this one, because this is about ULEZ. This is about the low emission zones in London. Sadiq Khan loves them. He absolutely loves them. He wants them to be further and further expanding into Greater London. 5 councils who are opposed of these ambitions to expand ULEZ have put together a lawsuit claiming the move is unlawful, and Sadiq Khan has said, well, if I lose, I haven't got any budgetary solution as to how I'm going to plug that gap. This all started with you.
Well, yeah, when I introduced the congestion charge, that was legally challenged by Tory councils too. But then the death toll went down by 12% from air pollution. And now air pollution...
Over what period of time? Like, how is that quantifiable?
That was over a few years, it went down by 12%. But if you just look at this now, when Boris Johnson beat me for mayor, he scrapped my plan to tackle all this air pollution. And then under his 8 years, 76,000 Londoners died from air pollution. So Sadiq Khan is going to be saving tens of thousands of lives, and we should all throw our weight behind it.
Do you drive?
I've never driven in my life. Just got on the bus and the tube.
Well, OK, Emma Webb, I'll go on that bombshell. I'll come to you.
I
have nothing. I have nothing. Ken Livingstone, you started the death of the car. I have something, actually.
Ken has got a lot to answer for.
Hold the line, caller. The death of the car at the moment, it feels like a war on the motorist, and the cost of this to local shops, to high streets, to families, to children being taken to sports activities, all the stuff that make life worth living, Ken. We can't do that on a bus or a bike.
You can do it on a bus. I've been on a bus and the tube all my life. Or you can walk more, which makes it healthier for you. Always just driving, really damages your health. You'll live longer if you don't drive.
You've got a bad knee. Is that from walking all your life?
Well, no, that's... My mum had it, my grandma had it. It's a family trait.
Well, look, I like the safety of my car, Emma Webb. I want to be able to lock my doors.
Yeah. It won't be safe if you hit someone else and you blow up.
Well, I can't hit anybody. I don't get over 20 miles an hour in my car in London at the moment. I mean, I know what you mean about the fact that it might be sometimes quicker. The congestion charge has made no difference. £12.50 to take a car out of my house if it's an old one.
So, firstly, all well and good talking about taking a bus or walking, but that's no good if you're a tradesman or if you're a charity that's sort of delivering food to homeless people.
Or disabled.
All sorts of people who need to be able to drive in London. But this is not about London, is it? This is about Greater London. This is about inside of the M25. I think that this ULEZ charge is just Sadiq Khan treating the people within the M25 as his piggy bank.
I agree.
This is all about money. This is about Sadiq Khan milking the people of London for the purposes of filling holes in his budget. I think that the ULEZ charges are absolutely wrong. I think that it is penalising working people, tradesmen who need to be able to drive. Particularly, we're talking, one of the councils that has taken this lawsuit is in Surrey. So, we're talking about people on the edges of London, in Greater London, who are on the borders of places like Essex and Kent, who are living in areas which are very much not central London, not necessarily well connected by buses and transport routes and so on. This is Sadiq Khan milking the people of this country to fill the holes in his own budget.
And he's made it...
He's not doing this to get more money.
I actually think
he's doing it to save their lives. Thousands of people are dying every month from this.
But they aren't really, though, Ken. Like, people who die of lung conditions, they may be exacerbated by poor air, but there aren't healthy people dropping dead in the streets because we've got a thick smog that is suffocating people.
They are dying from the air pollution we've got in our skies. I mean, it's appalling. I mean, literally, all my life, people have been dying from air pollution in London. And the question is, that went down when I introduced the various changes I made, and it's gone up when those are removed. When under Boris Johnson's 8 years as mayor, 76,000 Londoners died from air pollution. And many of those had voted for him, and they died because of it.
I think it's a typically bourgeois policy from Labour.
I totally agree. That is not at all accounting for people who can't afford to upgrade their car to something flashy that doesn't kick out as much fumes necessarily. And also just don't want to take the bus and don't want to walk, don't want to cycle. We're going back to medieval Britain, it seems, in the name of development.
If it's medieval, we'd have to be on horses.
Would you be happy to see people on horses? I mean, but genuinely, like, joking apart, Ken, have you ever, or can you picture what it must be like for a working parent to do the school run via the supermarket, to get their kids to an activity, to pop back to the office, to take a dish round to an elderly relative? You can't do that on a bike.
Do it better by getting more buses, more routes, and expanding our public transport, so that you should be able to get everywhere to do.
You just can't do all that.
You can do that. I massively expanded public transport in my 8 years as mayor.
My dad lives in one of these areas on the very outskirts of London. He's a van driver. He needs his van for work. He drives out into his office in the countryside. It's not somewhere like central London. This policy is screwing over hard-working people at a time when they simply cannot afford it, and it's wrong.
It's saving their lives.
It's not saving their lives. Wow, the number of things that have been pushed through under the safety and the, as you say, the paternalistic desire of the left to start saving everyone's lives. Can we just get on with our lives? Anyway, it's been lovely to have you both here this morning. Great conversation. Thank you, Ken. Thanks, Emma. We've come to the end of the show. It has absolutely flown by this morning. I'll be back on your telly again tonight at 8 o'clock, sitting in this week until we have new personnel on GB News from Monday onwards. I'll be there at 8 o'clock tonight, 8 till 9. But coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Longhurst. I am Bev Turner. I'll see you later at 8 o'clock, and then I'm not on tomorrow. So that's my last show of the week. Have a great day.
Hello again and welcome to your GB News forecast with me, Luke Mile. We've got some bright weather across some parts of the country today. Still quite grey and damp across southern areas and some wetter and windier weather across the north of Scotland overnight. We've got high pressure to the west of the UK. A ridge extends its way through central parts, bringing the brightest of the weather. But as you can see, a frontal system just clearing the southwest and another system pushing in across Scotland through the day. So here it will turn wetter and windier for a time. Best of the sunshine today will be northern England, southern Scotland into Wales and the Midlands, but still quite grey, quite misty and damp across some southern areas. Still some bits and pieces of light rain and drizzle across the southwest into the afternoon, but temperature's not too bad on the face of it. Probably feeling quite cool under the cloud, but not too bad where we've got the sunshine. Through this evening, though, that rain and stronger winds become more dominant across Scotland. Some gales for the far northeast, but most of the rain tends to fizzle out after midnight. Just some bits and pieces drifting southwards. With the clearer skies across southern England, though, a touch of frost forming here. So you will need your scraper across South Wales and southern England first thing on Friday morning. So a chilly start to the day here. Some sunshine around first thing. But as I say, that cloud is drifting southwards. So the sky is turning milkier, turning greyer. And I think for some places, as this cold front drifts southwards, we will see a few bits and pieces of rain. 1 or 2 heavy bursts likely. Further north, though, where we see behind the cold front, we'll see some clearer skies, 1 or 2 showers for eastern coast, quite a keen northerly breeze, so feeling quite chilly here. But again, temperatures not too bad for this stage in February. As we go into Friday night then, we continue to see 1 or 2 bits and pieces of rain just clearing the southwest. Showers for the east, clear spells for much of the country will allow a few mist or fog patches and some frost to form. And high pressure dominates for the next few days, some sunny spells and turning a little bit cooler. Goodbye.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the